My stepmother once told me I was just extra luggage in this family. She laughed while I cried. But today, she can't even step into my mansion without my permission. I grew up in a house where I was never wanted. My name is Marley Prescott. I was always told I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong. Vivian, my stepmother, made sure I felt it every day. She was cold, controlling, and never missed a chance to remind me that I was just a burden. My father, Derek, never stopped her or stood up for me. He was quiet, distant, and let everything happen. My stepsister, Cassidy, was the opposite. She was spoiled, praised for everything, and always treated like the favorite. I spent most of my childhood cleaning, running errands, and being careful not to upset Vivian. I learned to stay invisible, to work hard without expecting recognition. Even though my home life was harsh, I refused to let it break me. I studied in secret, stayed focused in school, and took small jobs to save money. I dreamed of leaving that house and proving I could succeed without anyone's help. I worked late nights and weekends, often exhausted, but I never gave up. Every insult and every order from Vivian made me more determined. I promised myself that one day, I would be in control, and no one could treat me like I didn't matter. When I turned 18, I finally got my chance. I won a scholarship and moved far away from home. For the first time, I felt free. I worked multiple jobs, managed my expenses carefully, and started building a life of my own. I didn't just want to survive, I wanted to thrive. I knew education and discipline were my keys to escaping the life Vivian had trapped me in. Each day, I grew stronger, smarter, and more independent. Looking back now, I realized that every moment of humiliation, every order I was forced to follow, and every cold word from Vivian taught me resilience. I learned how to handle disappointment, how to plan for the future, and how to turn pain into motivation. I was no longer just extra luggage. I was someone who could decide her own destiny. I built my career, invested wisely, and eventually purchased my mansion, a place where I could finally feel safe and respected. The little girl who once cried in the corner of the kitchen now stood tall in her own home, in control of her life and unshakable. Vivian can try to enter now, but she can't without my permission. I am no longer the girl she once mocked. I am someone she cannot control, someone who refuses to be broken, someone who has finally claimed her worth. During my teenage years, life at home felt like a constant battle. Vivian, my stepmother, seemed to take pleasure in making me feel small. She would find fault in everything I did, no matter how hard I tried. If I tried to speak up, she would twist my words and make Derek, my father, believe I was the problem. He never stopped her, and it felt like I had no one to trust. Opportunities that other kids took for granted were always denied to me. I wanted to go on school trips, join clubs, or take music lessons, but Vivian would find a reason to say no. She made me feel like I didn't deserve any of it. Cassidy, my stepsister, on the other hand, got everything she wanted. It seemed like Vivian's favorite thing was to compare us, always making me look worse. It hurt deeply, but I learned to hide my sadness and push through the pain. Even though life felt unfair, I refused to let it stop me. I started to work quietly on my own dreams. I spent hours studying, making sure my grades stayed high. I also took small part-time jobs to earn my own money. These jobs gave me a sense of freedom and showed me that I could rely on myself. While Vivian tried to tear me down, I built my own strength and independence. At school, I paid extra attention to learning everything I could. I knew that education could be my ticket out of that house. I kept my successes private because I didn't want Vivian to find a way to ruin them. Every time she insulted me or told me I couldn't do something, I stored that anger and used it as motivation. I imagined a future where I could leave and never feel trapped or belittled again. I learned to be careful with my words and actions. If I showed weakness, Vivian would use it against me. I became observant, watching how she manipulated Derek and others around her. I realized that understanding people's behavior could be a powerful tool. I kept my plans in my mind, slowly building a way to escape the control and cruelty of my home. Even though I was treated unfairly, I discovered my own strength during those years. I realized that no one could truly stop me if I worked hard and stayed focused. The humiliation I felt only made me more determined to succeed. Every rejection, every insult, and every unfair rule became a lesson in resilience. I started to see that my future was in my own hands, and that knowledge kept me going even on the hardest days. By the time I left for college, I had built a quiet confidence. I knew that life outside that house would give me the freedom and respect I had never received at home. I had learned to protect myself, to work for what I wanted, and to dream of a life where I would finally be in control. Those teenage years, full of betrayal and pain, were also the years that made me strong enough to survive and succeed. When I turned 18, everything finally began to change. I had earned a scholarship to a university far from home, and for the first time, I could leave the house that had always made me feel small. Vivian, of course, couldn't resist one last cruel comment. "Don't forget, you'll always be extra luggage," she said, laughing like it was funny. I didn't respond. I just packed my bags and left, feeling a mix of relief and fear. Living on my own for the first time was both exciting and terrifying. I had to manage everything: my classes, my money, my meals, and my chores. I worked part-time jobs to cover my living expenses and took out small loans to pay for books and other essentials. Every day was a lesson in responsibility. I learned to cook, clean, budget, and handle problems without anyone stepping in to help me. It wasn't easy, but each challenge made me stronger. Being away from Vivian and the constant negativity gave me space to breathe and think clearly. For the first time, I could focus on myself without someone trying to tear me down. I spent late nights studying and researching ways to improve my skills and knowledge. I began to dream bigger than I had ever allowed myself to before. I realized that freedom wasn't just about leaving my old home. It was about taking control of my life and making choices that no one could interfere with. The experience also taught me patience and resilience. Sometimes I failed at managing my time or money, but I didn't give up. I learned to solve problems on my own and to accept that mistakes were part of growing up. Every small victory, whether it was paying a bill on time or earning a good grade, gave me confidence. Slowly, I started to see that I could survive and thrive without relying on anyone else. Most importantly, I began to plan for the future I wanted. I didn't want to just get by. I wanted to build a life where I could be safe, respected, and independent. I thought about the career I wanted, the home I would have, and the person I would become. I understood that this was my chance to rewrite my story and leave behind the pain and humiliation of my past. Those first months of independence changed me. I realized that freedom was not just leaving a house. It was learning to stand on my own, trusting myself, and working toward a life I controlled. For the first time, I felt hope and purpose. I knew that I was no longer the girl Vivian called extra luggage. I was Marley Prescott, and my life was finally mine to shape. Every step I took was a small victory toward the life I had always dreamed of, and I promised myself that I would never let anyone control me again. After years of hard work, I finally graduated from college. I felt proud and ready to start my life. I got a corporate consulting job, the kind of opportunity one had dreamed about while working late nights and juggling multiple responsibilities in school. It wasn't easy at first, long hours, demanding clients, and learning the ropes, but I enjoyed the challenge. Every task I completed reminded me that I was capable and strong. I also started thinking about my future beyond just a paycheck. I learned about investing and began putting money aside quietly. I wanted to make my money work for me, so I could build real independence and security. I didn't tell anyone about it because I knew some people would try to discourage me or take advantage of my success. Watching my savings grow slowly gave me hope and made me feel in control for the first time in my life. Meanwhile, back home, I heard bits and pieces about Vivian's constant control over Cassidy. She was trying to shape her into someone just like herself, spoiled, demanding, and self-centered. Cassidy was young and impressionable, and it pained me to know that Vivian was trying to repeat the same toxic patterns on another child. Even though I was far away, the thought of Vivian manipulating her stepsister made me more determined to succeed. I wanted to show that life could be different, and that a person could rise above cruelty and control. The contrast between my life and theirs became clear to me. I was working hard, learning, and making choices that would secure my independence. At the same time, Vivian was still trying to impose her will, molding Cassidy the way she had tried to mold me. I realized that proving Vivian wrong wasn't just about wealth or success. It was about showing strength, intelligence, and the ability to live a life without being controlled. As I continued in my job, I focused on building skills, understanding the business world, and making connections that could help me in the future. Every project I completed gave me confidence. I could see that my efforts were paying off, not just in my job, but in my sense of self-worth. I felt proud knowing that I was no longer defined by Vivian's words or actions. The more I learned about investing and building my career, the more determined I became to succeed quietly but surely. I wanted to create a life where I could make my own rules and never feel powerless again. Hearing about Vivian's attempts to control Cassidy only strengthened my resolve. I promised myself that one day, I would not only achieve my goals, but I would also show that I was capable of overcoming the toxicity of my past. My focus, independence, and careful planning were all part of the journey toward proving that I could rise above everything Vivian had ever tried to use against me. When I was in my late 20s, I received news that changed everything. My father, Derek, had left important assets to me in his will, completely bypassing Vivian and Cassidy. I couldn't believe it at first. All those years of feeling invisible and unwanted suddenly felt like they were being erased. Vivian, of course, was furious when she found out, but I could tell she believed she could still twist the situation in her favor. I didn't respond to her anger. Instead, I stayed calm and focused on what I could do next. I decided it was time to make a real move for my independence. I used the inheritance carefully, planning every step. My first big decision was to buy a mansion, something I had dreamed of for years, but never thought I could achieve. The house was beautiful and private, a place where I could finally feel safe and in control. I furnished it myself, choosing everything with care. Every room reflected my taste, my success, and the life I had worked so hard to build. Alongside the mansion, I continued to grow my wealth quietly. I invested in opportunities that I understood, making sure my money was working for me. I avoided taking unnecessary risks, knowing that my independence was more important than showing off. Slowly but surely, I built a fortune that no one in my old house could have imagined. The thought that Vivian might try to interfere didn't scare me anymore. I had learned how to protect myself and my assets legally and strategically. Even as Vivian tried to regain control, I stayed focused on my life. I didn't need to argue or prove anything to her in words. My success spoke for itself. Every decision I made, every property I bought, and every investment I managed was another step in building a life that she could never touch or manipulate. For the first time, I truly felt the satisfaction of freedom. The freedom to live on my terms without anyone telling me what I could or couldn't do. I also started thinking about the future, imagining how different my life would be from the years of control and humiliation I had endured. I realized that all those struggles had prepared me for this moment. I could now make choices without fear, and my life reflected the hard work, patience, and resilience I had cultivated over the years. The turning point wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about realizing that I had the power to create my own life. Vivian's anger and attempts to manipulate me no longer mattered. I had surpassed her expectations and built a life she could never touch. My mansion, my investments, and my independence were proof that I was no longer the girl she had dismissed as extra luggage. For the first time, I felt fully in control, confident, and proud of what I had accomplished. The life I had dreamed of was now real, and nothing could take it away. After buying my mansion, I knew I needed to secure my future even more. I decided to open my own boutique investment firm. I wanted to be in full control of my career and finances. Starting a business was challenging, but I was determined. I worked long hours, learning everything I could about running a company, managing clients, and making smart investments. Slowly, I built a team of people I could trust, people who respected me and shared my vision. They became more than employees. They became allies in my journey toward independence and security. I also made sure everything I owned was legally protected. My mansion, my investments, and all my assets were secured in a way that Vivian could never touch without my permission. I wanted to remove any possibility of her trying to interfere. Every document, every contract, every account was carefully reviewed and strengthened. I felt a deep sense of relief knowing that no one could manipulate or control me anymore. For the first time, I truly felt safe in my own life. Meanwhile, Vivian began hearing rumors about my business and my success. She dismissed them at first, thinking I could never reach the level of wealth and influence that I was quietly achieving. I knew she would underestimate me, and I used that to my advantage. I didn't need to announce my success or prove anything to her yet. Every investment I made, every client I gained, and every milestone I reached was another step toward solidifying my independence. Opening the firm also gave me a sense of pride. I was no longer just surviving or escaping my past. I was actively building a future that I controlled. I could make decisions, take risks, and grow my wealth without anyone telling me what to do. The business became a symbol of my strength and a tool for my long-term plans. Vivian's ignorance of my careful planning made me feel even stronger. She believed she still had influence over me, but I knew that the power had shifted completely. I was the one in control now. My careful preparation meant that when the time came for the final reversal, she would have no way to stop me. Every day, I grew more confident. I knew that building power wasn't just about money. It was about independence, security, and the ability to make choices freely. My boutique firm, my mansion, and my carefully secured assets were proof that I was no longer the girl Vivian had belittled. I had created a life she could never manipulate, a life where I called the shots, and a life that reflected my strength, patience, and careful planning. For the first time in my life, I felt completely in control, ready for whatever came next, and confident that my past could no longer define me. My power was quiet but unstoppable, and I was finally living on my own terms. One afternoon, I received a message from Vivian saying she wanted to come by. She called it a visit to reconnect and act like nothing had ever happened. I knew better than to trust her words. After everything she had done, I wasn't going to let her in without control. She thought she could waltz into my life and act like she had power over me. When she arrived at the mansion, she tried to act casual, smiling as if everything was fine. I met her at the door, calm and composed, and told her that she could not enter without my legal permission. I said it politely but firmly. I could see her shock immediately. She wasn't used to being denied, especially by me. Her face twisted in disbelief, and she tried to argue, but I didn't give her a chance to manipulate or pressure me. Standing there, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and relief. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of Vivian or her anger. I realized that all the years of planning, learning, and working toward my independence had led to this moment. I wasn't the powerless girl she had tried to control anymore. I was in full control of my life, my home, and my decisions. Vivian continued to argue and plead, trying to find some way to convince me to let her in. I stayed calm, refusing to respond to her provocations. She could see that her usual tactics no longer worked. The humiliation on her face was undeniable. I could feel the power reversal in that moment. The years she had spent controlling me were finally over. It wasn't just about the mansion. It was about proving that I was untouchable, strong, and independent. Vivian could no longer dictate my life or make me feel small. I had built a life she could never control, and this encounter made it clear to both of us. Her attempts to manipulate me now failed completely. I realized that this moment marked a turning point. Every decision I had made, the investments, the mansion, the secured assets, and the careful planning, had led to this victory. I had not only protected myself, but also demonstrated that no one could force me back into the role of extra luggage. As she finally left, still stunned and frustrated, I felt a sense of peace and accomplishment. I knew that I had reached a level of independence where I could face her confidently, without fear or hesitation. That day at the door wasn't just about keeping Vivian out. It was about showing myself how far I had come, and that I was finally living life on my own terms. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to be free, strong, and untouchable. Vivian's presence could no longer intimidate me, and that realization filled me with a quiet but unshakable confidence. After the encounter at the mansion, I noticed a change in Cassidy. She had always followed her mother blindly, doing whatever Vivian wanted and believing everything she said. But now, seeing her mother's humiliation and the way I calmly refused entry, something seemed to shift. Cassidy looked confused and unsure, like she was beginning to see her mother in a different light. I decided to approach her carefully, without forcing anything. I invited Cassidy over to talk about life, choices, and the way people treat others. I didn't criticize Vivian directly. Instead, I shared my own experiences, the struggles I faced, and how I learned to make my own decisions. I wanted Cassidy to understand that life didn't have to be about control or manipulation. She could think for herself and make choices that were right for her. At first, Cassidy was hesitant. She had been raised to obey and admire Vivian, and it was confusing for her to hear someone else's perspective. But over time, she began to open up. She asked questions, listened to my advice, and slowly started to see that there could be a better way to live. I encouraged her to focus on her education, her ambitions, and her own path, rather than trying to please her mother or follow her toxic patterns. Vivian, of course, noticed the change. She saw Cassidy spending time with me, listening to my words, and even questioning some of her mother's actions. To Vivian, this felt like betrayal. She became frustrated and angry that her control over her daughter was slipping. She didn't understand that I wasn't trying to take Cassidy from her. I was simply showing her that she had the right to think and act for herself. Watching Cassidy grow and think independently gave me a sense of purpose beyond my own success. I realized that teaching her, guiding her, and showing her an alternative to Vivian's toxic behavior was important. It wasn't just about revenge or wealth anymore. It was about creating a positive influence, someone who could see through manipulation and make strong choices for herself. As Cassidy became more confident and aware, my own sense of moral authority grew. I wasn't just the girl who had escaped Vivian's cruelty. I was someone who could inspire change and offer guidance. Vivian's frustration only confirmed that I was making an impact, and it felt satisfying to know that I could quietly help someone break free from the cycle of control and fear. In that process, I understood that true strength wasn't just about power or possessions. It was about helping others see the truth and encouraging them to stand on their own, even when the person who hurt them most tried to hold them back. One day, I learned that Vivian was trying to interfere with my business. She wanted to sabotage the company I had worked so hard to build. At first, I didn't believe it could happen, but I knew her well enough to expect some scheme. She had always tried to control and manipulate everything in her path, and my success was no exception. I stayed calm and observed the situation carefully. I didn't react immediately or let anger take over. Instead, I thought through every possible move she could make. I reviewed all my contracts, checked my accounts, and strengthened the areas where she might try to interfere. I wanted to be ready for anything, and I made sure that nothing could catch me off guard. As I suspected, Vivian began contacting some of my former associates, trying to spread lies about my work and question my abilities. She thought she could turn people against me, but I had already built strong relationships with my clients and team. I quietly gathered proof of her attempts and documented everything. I knew that exposing her deception at the right moment would have the most impact. When the time came, I shared the evidence with the people she had tried to influence. I didn't make a scene or show anger. I simply presented the facts clearly and calmly. Her lies and manipulations were obvious to everyone, and the people she tried to deceive quickly saw the truth. Vivian was shocked and embarrassed as her plan completely failed. Her face showed disbelief and frustration, and it was clear that no one was willing to follow her schemes anymore. It was a powerful moment for me. I realized that all my hard work, planning, and patience had led to this victory. I didn't need to yell, argue, or humiliate her publicly. My calm and careful strategy had done the work for me. It wasn't just about money or the mansion anymore. It was about proving that I could protect what I built and overcome the manipulations of someone who had always tried to control me. Seeing Vivian fail so completely, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I had turned her own deception against her without ever lowering myself to her level. The success of my business, combined with my strategic handling of her attempts, showed me how far I had come. I was no longer the girl she had dismissed, mocked, or tried to control. From that day on, I felt stronger and more confident than ever. I knew that I could face challenges calmly and turn even attempts to harm me into opportunities to prove my strength. Vivian's failure was a clear reminder that patience, planning, and intelligence were far more powerful than anger or manipulation. I had finally secured my life, my business, and my peace, and no one could take that away from me. After everything that had happened, I decided to host a small gathering at my mansion. It wasn't meant to be flashy or grand. It was just a quiet way to celebrate how far I had come in the life I had built for myself. I invited a few close friends and trusted people who had supported me over the years. Walking through my home, seeing everyone happy and at ease, I felt a sense of calm and satisfaction I had never known before. As the gathering continued, Vivian appeared at the door. She hesitated, clearly unsure of how to approach me. I could see the tension on her face, the anger mixed with disbelief. She had to request my permission to enter, and I calmly granted it, politely but firmly. I didn't shout, argue, or make a scene. My control over the situation spoke louder than any words could. In that moment, it became clear that the power had shifted completely. She could no longer intimidate me or dictate my life. Cassidy, my stepsister, chose to stand with me that day. Watching her make that choice filled me with a quiet pride. I had guided her, shown her another way to live, and she had trusted me. That trust was a small but meaningful victory, showing me that I could help others see the truth even when they had been raised in a toxic environment. It reminded me that real strength comes from influence, guidance, and integrity, not anger or cruelty. As I looked around my mansion, at the people who cared for me and the life I had created, I reflected on everything I had endured. The years of being belittled, ignored, and treated like extra luggage had shaped me, but they didn't define me. I realized that my journey wasn't about revenge. It was about proving to myself that no one could make me feel worthless if I refused to accept it. Every step I had taken, from leaving home to building my career, protecting my assets, and mentoring Cassidy, had been about claiming my independence and dignity. That day, I understood the full meaning of strength. It wasn't about humiliating Vivian or showing her up. It was about living my life fully and confidently, without fear or dependence on anyone else. I had built a life where I could make my own choices, and no one could take that away from me. I finally felt a deep sense of peace and satisfaction, knowing I had not only succeeded, but had also grown into someone who could face challenges calmly, protect what mattered, and live on her own terms.